Hope you all had a wonderful excursion trip, and in Rajaji National Park you certainly would have got to sight some good wildlife, and you definitely would have enjoyed the trip. We would like to begin the day's proceedings by screening a short film on Forest Research Institute by the students of FRI deemed university. I invite Riji Basu to introduce the film in brief.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. Good morning, everyone. The path of sound credence is through the thick forest of skepticism. You have been here for quite some time now, and obviously you have visited the most obvious sites of this institute. But have you ever wondered how would it appear from the point of view of a layman? I believe that the clearest way into the universe is through the forest wilderness. Ladies and gentlemen across the world who have come here, respected scientists, professors, and all my fellow friends, hold your breath as we are now going to take you on a journey through the uncommon streets and alleys of our favorite Forest Research Institute. And this is a historical building, and you will admire the beauty of this institution. You are currently sitting in the legendary and one of the greatest teak wood auditoriums of the world, and shall be an audience to this beautifully documented dish, presented to you in a platter from the students of the Forest Research Institute deemed university. I would kindly request you all to please put your phones in a silent mode, and we are about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Avahana, the ode to welcome. Thank you.
Today I take you on a journey that is different from anything the others have witnessed till now. While I strode each lane of this institution, the intoxicating greenery embraced my weary traveler soul, providing an oasis to rest a wandering mind, and every frame, every location healed my world-worn heart.
I am a privileged witness. These words have cradled the silence of the unsteady night, the light of the day, and the habitats of many. With the breeze flowing gently at my sides, I have provided livelihood to my dwellers for time infinite, creating descriptive images of the pinnacles, depicting oriental white-eye, or the lowly dust of leopards, or the multi-hued flowers, or that of a butterfly. I transport them to a state where time itself is suspended. I am home to various natural treasures, both hidden and in plain sight. I am a combination of both restless activity and reclined laziness. I am where life begins and where it ends. I am the reserve forest, and this is my institute.
I began with a few hundred books and a few periodicals written in English and German languages, accommodated in a small room. Later, in 1929, I was shifted to Chakrata Road and provided with a magnificent building. Since then, you have met me every single day. I created the scaffold, and you have planted in me history, science, literature, art, and flavors enriching the soul with every passing breath. I structure your passion, your identity, modern or ancient, paperback or hardbound, fiction on research, poetry or prose. I house them all, well to the brim with knowledge. I am the ultimate source of information for a forester. I harbor mysteries, solved and yet to be processed, contend with the rustling pages and modernized soft copies in digital informatories. I am National Forest Library and Information Center, and this is my institute.
I started from a scrap, unlike some other circles which inherited previous historic collections. Since then, I have gradually developed into one of the major centers of taxonomic and floristic research in North India and am recognized by various universities for research. At present, I house about 330,000 specimens. I am the second largest of its kind in India, and I am digitized. I am the herbarium, and this is my institute.
Their footfalls echoes through my corridors as their spirits course through me, and their dreams and aspirations keep me alive. I was established as a deemed university in 1991 on the recommendation of UGC, Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India. At present, I provide academics at post-graduation level in 4 disciplines, namely forestry, environment management, wood science and technology, and cellulose and paper technology. I also provide PhD degrees in various fields. Students here are free to experiment with various aspects of forest and environment in state-of-the-art laboratories where they can seek guidance from leading scientists. I have embraced generation after generation of intelligentsia. I provide my students with one of the most beautiful campuses in India with its greenery and hilly backdrop. I am FRI University, and this is my institute.
We have come a long way, you and I. 100-year-long love affair, it's never devoid of its difficulties. I have witnessed endless possibilities in front of me, flavoring from the merry, proud faces of convocation to the contentment of retirement. I have stood resolutely, housing chairs, specially ordered for Lord and Lady Irwin when they came to India. The chair in between is meant for the President of the nation. I am Asia's largest teakwood panel auditorium, and this is my institute.
Since the First World War, I have stood sturdy, silently stretching my arms out to unite all forms of knowledge in forestry. I may be time-worn, but I will never become weary of the millions of hopes, dreams, and ambitions that harbor in me from dawn to dusk. I am set in lush green estate, spreading over 450 hectares, framed by the foothills of Himalayas. I am built in an impressive edifice with the confluence of Greco-Roman and colonial styles of architecture. My long arched corridors are not supported by a single piece of metal. Situated in an earthquake-prone region, I have survived a remarkable 100 years. I have seen the world changing from wooden stencils to digital informatories. I am Forest Research Institute, and I am your institution. There are things which never change no matter how many years are spent apart. Here, time seems to stand still. For once, this place made me feel how nature can work wonders on one. How bricks talk, how the age-old banyan tree court love, how the rustling leaves whisper, how the hills speak of dignity, and how Forest Research Institute tells you each day of its glorified journey.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you all would have enjoyed watching this short, informative film about FRI. These young amateur filmmakers from FRIDU deserve a huge round of applause for their excellent efforts in making. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for them.
Thank you, ma'am. There will be time, and then there will be time. But then, there will always be these precious moments, engraved in our memories forever. Ladies and gentlemen, hope you enjoyed it. Now, time for the credits. Direction, Orgho Chakraborty. I'd like to request Orgho to please come forward. Screenplay, Shommo Basu. Story.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear a huge round of applause for the entire team who's behind producing this film.
Director of Photography, Shoham Sheel. Editing, Anand Anil. Art Direction, Soumya Basu and Pratik Savita. Dialogues, Sanhita Ghosh, Advaita Ravindran, Soumya Basu. Associates Camera Department, Padmaja Talukdar, Anand Anil. Light, Saurabh Vishwas, Arijit Bhattacharya, Pratik Shavita. Sound Design and Mixing, Vishnu Satishan, Soumya Basu, Anand Anil, Orgho Chakraborty. Production Manager, Avilasha Dhiman. Color Connection, Ronit. Voiceovers, Advaita Ravindran, Kalzan Dol Matamang, Obrodita Chakladar, Saurabh Babu, Soumya Basu, Orgho Chakraborty, Padmaja Talukdar and Dyushi Sharma. Cast, Dyushi Sharma. And I'd like to thank everybody who has been a part of this. I'd like to thank our Honorable Director Ma'am, Dr. Khinwal Sir, our Honorable DG Sir. Thanks a lot. Hope you enjoyed it. Namaskar.
Thank you, Riju, and thank you all. Now, we move on to the fourth and the concluding plenary session of the 19th Commonwealth Forestry Conference. The theme of this plenary session is Pathways to Biodiversity Conservation, the pathways that explore the principles of ecology and their application in environmental management for the protection and management of biodiversity and sustainable development. We have two distinguished personalities as the moderators for this session. Dr. S.C. Gerola. Dr. Gerola is 1982 batch Indian Forest Service officer from Maharashtra cadre. Dr. Gerola has about 35 years of experience in the field of forest management, forest conservation, protected area network, and wildlife management. Prior to this assignment, he has been Additional Director General of Forests, Wildlife in the Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change, Government of India. May I invite Dr. S.C. Gerola, Director General ICFRE, to the dais. Thank you, sir. Our second moderator for this session will be Dr. David Andrew Wardle. Dr. Wardle is Senior Researcher at Center for International Forestry Research, C4. He is currently based in Montpellier, France. Prior to this new position, he was Research Director of C4's Forest and Governance Program. He managed 35 scientists and a portfolio of more than 20 research projects in Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Latin America. Prior to joining C4, Dr. Wardle was Regional Director for the Clinton Climate Initiative Forestry in the Asia-Pacific region, supporting the development of 7 REDD+ projects in Indonesia and Cambodia. He has over 30 years of experience working on natural resource management issues in more than 20 countries in Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. May I invite Dr. Wardle to the dais. We have 4 eminent personalities as the keynote speakers for this session. Dr. H.S. Singh. Dr. H.S. Singh is a retired Indian Forest Service officer and a former Principal Chief Conservator of Forest. He held various positions in forestry and wildlife sector and also worked as Chief Wildlife Warden, Gujarat State. Head of Social Forestry Wing and Principal Chief Conservator of Forests and Chairman, Gujarat Biodiversity Board. Presently, Dr. Singh is engaged as member of National Board for Wildlife. He is also a member of Gujarat State Board for Wildlife. He is also a member of Gujarat Coastal Zone Authority and member of Gujarat Biodiversity Board. May I invite Dr. H.S. Singh to the dais, please. Our second keynote speaker is Professor Jack Sadler. He is a faculty of forestry at the University of British Columbia, Canada. Professor Sadler is the endowed professor of forest products, biotechnology, and bioenergy, and also the former dean, faculty of forestry at University of British Columbia. Dr. Sadler has been involved for more than 35 years in various national and international organizations that have advanced the global understanding in the biorefinery area. He is a fellow of the Royal Society of Canada and has received many awards such as UFRO's Scientific Achievement Award, the Charles D. Scott Award for contributions in the field of biotechnology for fuels and chemicals. I invite Dr. Sadler to the dais. Dr. C.M. Seth is Environment Advisor to Central University of Jammu. Dr. Seth is an Indian Forest Service officer of 1978 batch and belongs to Jammu and Kashmir cadre. He has 38 years of service in the state. During his service period, he has held prestigious postings as Director, State Forest Research Institute, Chief Wildlife Warden, Managing Director, State Forest Corporation, and Chairman, State Pollution Control Board. He is member of Jammu and Kashmir State Biodiversity Board, Jammu and Kashmir State Cultural and Heritage Authority, an expert group on environment education and training of Ministry of Environment and Forests and Climate Change, Government of India, National Innovation Foundation Cell. He also served as chairperson, State Advisory Board of Worldwide Fund for Nature, India. He was internationally recognized for his contribution to Himalayan forestry by the American Biographical Institute. He is a recipient of Schlicht Medal 1977 from the Commonwealth Forestry Institute, Oxford University, in forestry research. I invite Dr. Seth to the dais. Our fourth keynote speaker for this session is Mr. Digvijay Singh Khati, who is the Principal Chief Conservator of Forests, Wildlife, and Chief Wildlife Warden of Uttarakhand State, India. Mr. Khati is a keen wildlife professional. He has been an associate of Indian Forest College, Dehradun. He worked as director of important wildlife reserves like Dudhwa and Rajaji National Parks and Corbett Tiger Reserve. He served as professor in Wildlife Institute of India, Dehradun, and held important positions in Uttarakhand Forest Department. He has been a Commonwealth Fellow at University of Bradford, UK, and UNDP FAO Fellow at University of New England, Australia. He has special interest in biodiversity conservation and community participation. May I request Mr. Khati to join the panel on the dais, please. Thank you, sir. The rapporteurs for this session are Dr. S.K. Sharma and Dr. Manas Barge, who are requested to kindly take down the notes on the proceedings and highlights of this session. And now, without further ado, I hand over the plenary session to the honorable moderators with a request to kindly conduct the session. Thank you, sir.
Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The time has really flown, and we are already into the last day of the 5-day conference. It has been a wonderful experience for all of us. Yesterday, the delegates had a small glimpse of countryside India, and I'm given to understand that they have really enjoyed, and some of our guests have been lucky enough to sight a tiger also. The topic for today's plenary is pathways to biodiversity conservation. And as we have been discussing over the last 4 days, biodiversity conservation is central to sustainable development. To borrow a phrase from Hosni al-Lakhani, the question is, how do we move from the agreed text to action on the ground? We have a large number of instruments available at international level as well as national levels. However, the fact remains that despite all these policy instruments, international agreements, laws, guidelines, procedures, the biodiversity has been depleting at an alarming rate. One of the estimates is that during the 20th century, the rate of depletion and global extinction of species was 1,000 times higher than the average rate during the preceding 65 million years. Large amount of species have either gone extinct or they have entered the red data list. The threats are many, and we are generally aware of the threats, be it habitat degradation, habitat fragmentation, diversion of biodiversity-rich areas for agriculture and urbanization, over-exploitation of the resource, and invasive alien species. As we have been talking, the world is a global village, and we are not isolated as a nation to face the consequences of biodiversity degradation alone. We all have to face the consequences together. With that as a background, I am very happy to welcome the four very eminent speakers for this plenary session. No topic has been assigned to them as such, and we will be getting an insight from all these four distinguished speakers as to what is their vision to move towards biodiversity conservation, what have been their experiences, and how do we take our various agreements forward. With these initial remarks, I hand over the floor to my co-moderator, David, for his initial remarks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gairola. In the interest of leaving the space to the speakers, I'm going to be extremely brief. It's not every day that you get a phone call in the middle Himalayas out of the blue during a field trip to Dhanolti. And to be honest, my initial reaction was I was a bit worried that it might have been a call about my father, who's 88 and not in good health. However, it turned out to be the organizers of this conference saying, would I step in and co-moderate this session because Mr. Anil Kumar from the ministry was not able to be here. So of course I agreed on condition that everyone recognizes this is not an area of specialization. However, having talked to Manisha this morning, who's our session host, I understood that we have a very broad and liberal interpretation of biodiversity, and certainly Jack Sadler will be talking on a slightly different theme, but again, which I think should reiterate one of the key messages from this conference. It's very difficult to box forestry into any particular corner. But I think in terms of that broad interpretation, I was privileged during the visit to Dhanolti yesterday to visit one of the eco-parks, as I think they're called, which has been set up as a community-based natural resource management initiative under what I think the government of India refers to as ecotourism. And we were delighted to have a visit in amongst the Deodar forests and the quercus at that high altitude, 2,300 meters above sea level, but to actually witness that there were very large numbers of families and children actually using this eco-park. So I think this is a wonderful example of how we can interpret biodiversity. So I will stop here just by adding that within C4's own research, we anchor very much our own biodiversity conservation research around the landscapes approach. So thank you very much, and I think we will invite the speakers.
I now invite Dr. H.S. Singh, former PCC of Gujarat, for his presentation. I request all the distinguished speakers to restrict to a time of 15 minutes so that we have got adequate time for discussions after the presentations. I also suggest that we keep our questions for the discussion session at the end. Thank you very much. Dr. Singh, please.
I start from the film that we have seen just now. FRI has witnessed changes during last 110 years. They have seen abundant wildlife in first decade of 20th century. Perhaps annual hunting record of the tiger, lion, black buck, leopard annual record is much more than the present population. That was scenario in beginning of the 20th century. Second World War and the 2 decades after this had witnessed a lot of destruction. And if you read the report of the survey of the major mammals in Asia, somewhere at the end of the 1960s and 60s, beginning of 70s, it's very alarming. And then in 70s, the conservation era initiated. Environment protection and conservation era started. In India, we started through a lot of legislation policy in 70s, but 80s and 90s sees peak of conservation. Why I say 80s and 90s in India? Because most of the major legislation after Wildlife Protection Act, Forest Conservation Act, National Policy, then Coastal Zone Regulation Act in 1991, you see the development of 2 decades that we are witnessing today, recovery of most of the population of the mammals, mostly in the protected area. This is a big sign. But the last decade and present decade, there is a check in momentum of the conservation. And this happened because of the global development. China decided growth trajectory of the world because they exceeded double-digit growth. Most of the countries trying to achieve double-digit growth. And this pushed conservation because a lot of relaxation. And in 2006, there is an act that caused the Tribal Right Act. It was set back to the Indian Forestry. And there are a lot of relaxations have been given and things are already going on. So at present, perhaps the investment, effort, action that we witnessed in 1980 and 1990s and present, there is some reverse trend, a lot of relaxation because the development, especially in the term of laws and legislation in 1980s and 91, it created a lot of pressure. And because of pressure, the government is getting some action for the relief. See here in India, despite very high pressure, this human population is, because our size is 1/3 of China, 1/3 of America, but population pressure is very high. But see the wildlife population, rate of extinction, perhaps India is one of the least and well-managed country. Because, the development pressure is increasing recently, so we have concern because we borrowed a lot of the Western, the model of the development, and that is creating a lot of stress to present scenario of the wildlife in India. See here, I have not given all major mammals. See the mega mammals. In Asia, 100 years ago, a book is written that the lion was still common in Persia and its surrounding area, and it was at verge of extinction in India. It disappeared from there, but it survived in India. See the tiger, 70% population is in Asia, in India. Asiatic elephant, 65%. Out of 21,000 leopard population in Asia, 15,000 in India. See the indicator, all major mammals, hope of wildlife in India, that indicate that despite such a huge pressure, human pressure, how Indian farm, because there is some strength. And in India, Indian society, the sensitivity towards life, not only human life. In consumerist nation, perhaps importance for human life is much more, but here the society has accorded the importance to every life that occur in our area. I have pick up one slide. See here, we have 512 million livestock. Against this, we have only 10 to 11 million wild mammals having weight more than 2.5 kg. That matter in availability of flesh biomass for this. See, this is only 2% of the total domestic livestock. And domestic livestock is highest in India. Out of these mammals, 400 plus mammals in India, see only 3 species matter for, that provide food for major carnivores, that is cheetah, blue bull, and wild boar, because they are in million, about 1 million, 1.1 million blue bull, more than 1 million wild boar, about 1.2 million cheetah, and then comes sambar. None of the species have population in lakes. So see the 10 million total mammal population, wild mammal population, against 10 million of the livestock population. See this, the rural setup of India supported a lot of wildlife. Most of the carnivores, hyena, jackal, foxes, all these species, they were dependent on livestock because major part of the flesh, the carcasses were available in the villages, and this was totally harvested by vulture. After evening, in night, everything disappear in the next morning by this animal. But things are changing in rural area because this skinning of the livestock, the animals in the rural area, this tradition is disappearing. So availability of food, every village in periphery of 2-3 kilometers, every day you will find at least 1-2 carcass available here and there, and that provided food for leopard, the carnivores. But this is changing, and this is the breaking, this is the causing serious problem for survival of animal which are dependent on the livestock, including vulture, leopard, hyenas, jackal, foxes, all these species, and this is the decline is very serious in India. So the tradition, our tradition and culture that is impacted because of development, it is also causing threat to our wildlife. Why I said the culture? Because this land society has a lot of impact of the Gautam Buddha Mahavir Jain. If you read Ashoka's rock edict of 300 BC, it prescribed the animal bar for hunting, and even capital punishment was given during the Mauryan period. In one of the rock edict, it is mentioned 300 BC that even wood containing insect and egg should not be burned. See the extreme step taken by Emperor Ashok at that time, and this society has evolved from there, and this is the reason that we are retaining most of these things. Now see the biodiversity conservation action globally, because after COP this actually target they have decided, but India also submitted 5 reports, but it is more theoretical. How much it is translated in ground, that is a matter of debate. Based on this 20 target, India also decided 12 target, and how much it is translated at the ground, that is a matter of discussion. I will not go much in detail. India has very strong institution, National Biodiversity Board, State Biodiversity Board, BMCs, and a very strong policy, legal support, wildlife management, working plan, they are properly prepared, implemented, action plan for wildlife biodiversity, it is decided and submitted. So India has very advanced process of policy and planning formulation, but recently, because of some problem, things are, the government is feeling a lot of discomfortable. This decade, as I mentioned, that conservation has little bit setback. Not only India, major part of the world. Finance flow has gone down. It is mainly because this sector is not recognized compared to other development sector, because our natural resources, they are not accounted as capital for development. Suppose Delhi, air pollution, this is people are facing problem. Environmental quality has gone down. The air is capital, natural capital. If this is accounted in national economy, river, air, water, forest, biodiversity, they are accounted in national economy and put as the capital how much it is going down, and GDP is calculated, then perhaps you will get importance in conservation of the wildlife. I will give example about the scientific advancement of India forestry sector. There are 2 achievements that change face of the country. One is clone of eucalyptus and poplar. Economy is huge, many thousand crore. Only two research that we have done by Forestry Research Organization that impacted scene of the country. And if say what is third research that has changed scenario of country, perhaps very difficult to find out. So this type of technological advancement has to be done. And these two research achievements are not done by the Forestry Institute, it is done by the private sector. So this is the area where we have to address, because it increased GDP, it created importance among the people, the farmers' condition have improved. So similar advancement is done in case of medicine and other sector, then it's good. See, the wildlife department has to be appreciated, because if say all subsector of the within the forestry, wildlife has become very effective, because most of the protected area are well managed despite a lot of problem. We have already prepared the wildlife conservation action plan. Third is already under consideration. Very soon it is going to be decided in a meeting. First was 83 to 2001, 15 years long conservation plan. Second was 2002 to 16. Third is already prepared, placed for decision. And this addressed all of issues, from genetics to landscape conservation, expansion of protected area, and wildlife being gradually try to achieve their target. See, if our target is as per the global target decided, the first is to develop economic tool to evaluate the wealth, natural wealth, biodiversity, forest, river, air. This how it is done, still we have not achieved. In 2008 and 9, first time, the value of annual contribution of tree outside of forest was done, and value was 81,000 crore rupees. See the annual report of the finance department, contribution of TOF to the national economy was 81,000 crore out of total 1,20,000 crore of the forestry sector. How it has done? Similarly, if it is done for medicinal plant services, perhaps we may reach somewhere 4 to 5% of the total GDP. See, the first target decided, still we have not achieved, and process is going on. Second target, I have not picked up all target, major important component I have taken. 17% of the terrestrial area has to come under the protected category. Present we have only 5%. Of course, as per the principle, law that prescribe for the management of forest, reserve forest, they are sustainably managed, so they can be also categorized as the protected area. Our report included that 20% target we have received, but I have certain doubt about this because all forest is not in same category. Some are under cultivation, some are degraded, intentionally used by the human being. So about 10% and 10% of the coastal zone, 2.2 million square kilometer our this economic exclusive zone. If say 2%, we have about 7,000 square kilometer under marine protected area. Huge area has to come to achieve this target. Okay.
Like to conclude, please. Last 2 minutes.
Fine. Okay. Then conservation of these things. So I will pick up. I will move fast. I will give example. Here, country is working for landscape planning and conservation. Tiger Cell has done for 5 landscape planning. They have demarcated or exercise is done. Wildlife, the Asiatic lion landscape plan, it covers 5 protected area, it is done. So the future of protected area, and this cover 2.2% of the total geographical area, landscape of tiger and lion. That cover 2.2%, that is almost 40% of the total protected area of the country. See, if I will give example of the landscape planning of the lion, I will take 2 minutes only. See 71, how lion, this territory expanded, conservation area expanded, and planning also went beyond the boundary, and the area coverage was only 3,300 about square kilometer, increased to 5,500 square kilometer, then 10,500 square kilometer in 10, and presently they are at point about 12,000 to 13,000 square kilometer. And the comprehensive planning already done, landscape planning, how they are corrected, corridor planning, conservation planning, it is done. Similarly, this is the scenery how lion has done. Tiger cell has also planned about 5 landscape planning, but central India, because they are fragmented, it's very difficult to do. If such planning, these are the achievement done. And the last slide I will see. If we create about 15 to 20 landscape in India, we can cover 80 to 90% of the total protected area. Landscape, when we talk about the protected area within landscape, there are corridor, there are ecological sensitive zone, everything should be intentionally managed. Perhaps there is a hope to improve the conservation scenario in India. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Singh. And you have given a broad overview of the Indian scenario so far as biodiversity conservation is concerned, particularly focusing on the status of biodiversity conservation in India vis-a-vis the world scenario. You have also flagged some very important aspects related to the need to further strengthen protected area network and how India is going ahead with its national biodiversity action plans. And you concluded with the landscape management example of lion conservation in Gujarat. Thank you very much.
Many thanks again to Dr. Singh, who conveniently introduced in one of his slides the notion of applying biotechnology to improve productivity, which provides a useful bridge for the next presentation. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jack Sadler from the University of British Columbia, Canada. Jack, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. So first of all, I want to say it's a great privilege to be able to talk here in this cathedral of forestry. So I want to congratulate FRI and Dr. Savita and all our colleagues for putting together this conference. It's a great privilege and a pleasure to be here. Also, I think what I'll try and cover in the next 20 minutes, very quickly, is that I think forests are very much an indicator of climate change because they fill the role of the canary in the coal mine, the litmus test, because as the forests change, and I'll use some examples from UBC, it's an indication of what's happening to the world. So what I'm going to try and cover is some perspectives from UBC, but I was also fortunate to be able to work at the International Energy Agency in Paris right before the COP21 summit. So I was doing this after I finished as dean, where all my hair fell out. So look at John Innes in a couple of years' time and see what he looks like. So really what I would like to cover is my punchline, if I'm able to keep your attention for 20 minutes, is that the problem with bioenergy biomass is the challenges with the reliability and consistency of data. So I'm going to talk about some of the data, not the FAO data. Also, there's challenges with getting the feedstock cheaply and sustainably. Most people think the biomass is cheap. It's not so cheap and it's not so sustainable. Also, one of the things I learned when I was in Paris is that biomass is actually more like oil than coal, mainly because from biomass you can make lots of chemicals, lots of biomaterials. The same types of products you can make from oil, you can make from biomass, whereas solar and wind pretty well make electricity. That's it. And also, if we look at decarbonizing, one of the issues I realized is that India, for example, uses coal, as does China for its electricity. The problem we all have is we know where the coal is, there's lots of coal, it's cheap, and the problem is if we're trying to compete economically with coal, it won't work. So we basically need some form of policies to basically wean us off coal. So policy, it can't be straight economics. So I put this graph up here about the price of oil. Why this is important to me is the first time it went up with the oil price was when I got my driver's license and my dad wouldn't let me drive his car because the price of petrol had gone up. The second time it went up was actually when I went to Canada because I went to the National Research Council to start working on their biofuel program. So the price of oil had a direct impact on me personally. And one of the issues we have just now is that many of the technologies were based on oil being at about $100 a barrel, $150 a barrel, and it's $50 a barrel, and it's projected to stay relatively low for quite some time. Plus, coal is going to stay cheap for a long time. So what do we do to catalyze using biomass? So learned journals like The Economist predicted wrongly the end of the oil age because of the price of oil. And again, there was a famous quote in there that said, the Stone Age didn't stop because of a lack of stones, so the oil age is not going to end because of a lack of oil. It's going to be mostly environmental issues. Also, the National Geographic talked about the end of cheap oil. Well, actually, oil's pretty cheap, and it will stay relatively cheap. So again, these learner journals got it wrong. So IEA, why was the International Energy Agency formed? Well, it was formed because of the oil crisis. When I talked to my graduate students, none of them, of course, were born when the oil crisis happened, but this had a direct impact. And one of the issues the IEA has is the IEA is actually composed of OECD countries. So this is the developing world, and one of the big problems with the IEA is India's not a member, China's not a member. So the countries that are actually going to be using more and more energy are actually not part of the IEA, and IEA realizes this is an issue. It was originally formed because of energy security, but increasingly, if you can look at the bottom line, it's not so much energy security, it's all about sustainability and climate change. So that's really what's driving IEA, and that's one of the reasons I was on sabbatical to basically lead the bioenergy biofuel file before COP21. I'm the task leader, one of the tasks in charge of liquid biofuels, so this is why I'm going to finish off about liquid biofuels. We have 15 member countries. One of the reasons I'm here in India is to try and get India to join Task 39. And it covers technical and policy issues of biofuels. I'm also going to give this from a perspective from UBC. Any of you who have been to UBC will recognize this picture. And as my colleagues know, our past president, President Toop, was all about sustainability, the living laboratory. We all have to pay more for parking. We now have very small garbage pails. And we encourage more and more wooden buildings. We currently have the tallest wooden building, I think, in the world at the moment. So a lot of ways of sequestering carbon in buildings, as well as trying to decarbonize where we are at UBC. Also, one of my colleagues, Bill Rees, came up with a carbon footprint, or actually he called it an ecological footprint, which is another link to this session. So Bill Rees, about 15 years ago, came up with the term carbon ecological footprint. So again, another link with this being a concern at UBC for well over a couple of decades. This is when it hit the front page. This is 10 years ago. So the front page of our local newspaper all talked about climate change and what would happen. And I think I've got a series of slides here that shows what does happen. This is our British Columbia forests. I'm sure many of you have seen these slides. The green is lodgepole pine. The tiny little bit red in the middle is the mountain pine beetle epidemic with the fungus Ophiostoma that rings the tree and kills it. And basically the beetles are normally killed off because of very long cold winters. Our winters are getting warmer. You can see these vast tracts of forests which are dying or dead, which burn very readily, are harder to process. The silver lining of this whole thing is that was the start of our pellet sector. So we basically, as the lumber was going through the sawmill, there was more and more residue, and really the pellet sector recognized this could be a feedstock for making pellets. But in the bottom right, instead of burning it, the research we've been looking at is, can we use this biomass as a feedstock for making biochemicals, biofuels? So the same way as oil is too precious to just burn, we use oil to make all the plastics that we take for granted. My punchline from my presentation is this biomass should be the basis of a biorefinery, same way as we use oil to make all these different products. Now, what I want to digress on for a minute is getting data. So when I was at IEA, and this is data from 2015 from BP, and you can see that BP, or maybe you can't see, but what you can look at it is that renewables are actually about 1/4 the size of hydroelectricity. And this is because BP doesn't look at the developing world. So it didn't consider basically any of the biomass that's used in places like Africa or Asia. And so if you look at this data, as I'll show in the next slide, when you start looking at IEA's own data, suddenly by far the biggest form of renewable energy is biomass. Biomass is much bigger than hydroelectric. And this is all because of the developing world. And if you start looking at other data, you can see that with the REN 21 data, they look at all renewables, then they break it down into modern renewables and traditional biomass, which is half of it. And then you start getting into traditional meaning cooking and charcoal making. So again, one of the misconceptions out there is that biomass is not that important. It's by far the biggest form of renewable energy out there, much bigger than hydroelectric, much bigger than solar, much bigger than wind. And one of the challenges for countries such as India is how do you translate that traditional use of biomass into modern biomass and doing it sustainably? Same sort of challenge for China. Again, if you start looking at the data, this is actually BP's data, you can see where's the energy demand going to come from? Well, it's going to be coming from India, it's going to be coming from China, because most of the OECD countries are pretty well leveled off. Our populations are not growing. We've got cars that are more energy efficient, the houses are more efficient, so the energy demand is actually going to come from India, it's going to come from China, Brazil, and non-OECD countries. So one of the issues that we've been looking at is if you're trying to work with renewables, and if you'll use electricity as the common denominator, the same way as coal, oil, and natural gas can all make electricity, you can make electricity pretty well from all renewables. One of the potentials, I think, for biomass is if you get into transportation, there's only two modes for transportation, either electric or biofuels. And my last slide, if I get there, in some sectors such as aviation, there's only biofuels. If you're trying to decarbonize, you can't use electric, you can't use nuclear. Basically, it's only biofuels. And this is why there's the potential about using biomass as a way to make biojet. So very quickly, what IEA has done is to put together a series of roadmaps. This roadmap's in the process of being updated. I've been working on the roadmap for biofuels. This is the biofuel roadmap. So if you go on the IEA website, you'll see this report. Some of the work our group has done is to look at the various technologies that are out there in terms of biochemical, Fischer-Tropsch, gasification, pyrolysis. So it's really looking at each of these different technologies and how things have changed in the last few years is how do we piggyback or tie in with the traditional oil sector. So you have oil companies such as BP, Chevron, and I was at Indian Oil before I came here because Indian Oil is looking at how do they decarbonize, how do they tie in with using biomass as a way of displacing oil. The most recent data I'm going to touch on here is this, what IEA calls the Mr. report. One of the things I realized, I was there for 2 weeks trying to figure out what the Mr. report was. But the Mr. report is the Midterm Renewable Energy Market Report. That's where the Mr. comes from. What I found interesting is when we look at India or China, what took generations in countries like Canada or Europe has all happened in one generation in India. This is put together with one of my grad students. She had talked about her parents and what they had hoped to when they were teenagers was the ones in the 1950s, 70s. The 1980s was the refrigerator, air conditioner, and now all our young members here all want to have a car. So what basically took 3 or 4 generations in OECD countries has all happened in one generation basically in China and India. So this is part of the reason why the energy growth has been so steep in places like India and China. I'm going to quickly go through some of this data here, but effectively what's been happening now is the global investment in renewables is actually as much as the investment in oil. So there is a big investment in this area. What I'll touch on here is the OECD countries. So if you look at where's the investment gone in, you can see impressively 2/3 of the investment in new energy goes into renewables. That's the green at the bottom. And 1/3. So this looks pretty impressive from an OECD point of view. But when you start factoring in non-OECD countries, this is mostly China and India, you can see that even though the biggest investment still is in fossil-based energy, the actual investment in renewable is twice as much as the OECD countries. So even though places like China and India are investing a lot in fossil-based energy, they're investing twice as much as OECD countries are. What's interesting is I hadn't fully realized that actually China accounts for about 40% of the global growth in renewables, primarily solar. So solar is big there the same way as it is in China, in India. And so this is why more and more IEA realizes that they need to be working with India and China in terms of the information that's available. So what I'm going to try and wrap up in the next 5 minutes or so, is that okay? Is mostly focused on biofuels. I'd mentioned before that the work we'd looked at in biofuels, and that's because if you look at biomass, I actually think biomass is too valuable to just burn. The same way as that we take oil and we burn it, by far the highest use for oil is making the plastics, all the other high value material, all the latexes that people make. One of the challenge is the growth of biofuels. If you look on this graph, if you can see it, you can see from about the mid-1980s it was growing quite steeply, but really everything slowed down as the price of oil went down. So it was actually only 3 years ago that the price of oil was relatively high, so it's been down as expected to stay low. So because of the low price of oil, the investment in making biofuels has not happened as much, despite efforts such as Indian Oil and the US Department of Energy investing in this area. These are just a series of slides showing some of the plants that are around the world. This is the plants that are operating in the United States. The Abengoa plant, unfortunately, though, is not operating. But again, this gives you each one of these plants is probably about 300 or 400 million US dollars. The Abengoa plant was $600 million, so giving you a sense of the size of investment. Brazil, we have 2 plants that are currently operating, both using sugarcane bagasse as the feedstock. Again, the price of these plants is about a couple of $100 million each. China, again, has not got the same infrastructure or the investment that Brazil and the US has. And one of the reasons I was here too was to find out what plants are going up. So I don't have any pictures of plants in India, but I think, as you probably know, there's several plants which are planned to be built in India, basically taking waste. One of the things I found out is the most likely feedstock that Indian Oil will use is actually rice straw that they'll be using rather than wood. And I think they're going to have big problems of logistics working with rice straw as compared to wood. So one of the challenges, I think, in this area is if you look at the projections from groups such as IEA and IRENA, is where's the biomass going to come from? Because if we're going to decarbonize along the lines that IEA wants, they are actually going to want about 1 billion tons of residue over and above of what we already have. So I think the big challenge for everyone is where's the bioenergy going to come from? Because my own opinion is it's probably going to come from residues initially, because the economics of growing bioenergy crops are problematic when you start factoring the cost of the land. So the same way as I think India will be a good example, because the definition of a residue in India is quite different from a residue in Canada. So how can we make better use of those residues before we start investing in bioenergy crops? So really my kind of, the series of slides here, the punchline for how we make this work is to have more of a biorefinery approach rather than just a straight energy approach. And really the report that's come out from IEA is the feedstock is actually more amenable to making biofuels, biochemicals, biomaterials, rather than just using it just for straight energy. And again, biomass is more like oil than it is like coal. And the example I use here is if you look at this, the barrel of oil, that 4% of the circle round, that 4% of the barrel oil gives you the plastics, all the chemicals that are very high value. And really, but you still need the petrol and the diesel to make the economics work. And so really what we're looking at bioconversion is if you look at these pie charts, at the top of the pie chart is basically petroleum end uses. And you can basically see that 4% of petroleum end use gives it 42% of the value. One of our challenges, and this is taken from OECD countries, you can see pulp and paper is about 56% of the value, solid wood is about 40%. The big opportunity for the forest sector is to make use of that 1/3 that currently has low value. We use it for pellets or we don't use it at all. So I think the opportunity for us is to take these residues and find much higher value uses for them and basically piggyback with some of the supply chains that are out there already. Some companies are already doing this. The example I use is Borregaard in Norway. Borregaard makes ethanol, but that ethanol doesn't go into transportation. That ethanol goes into deodorants, it goes into perfumes, they go into very high value uses for the ethanol. The example I use about how they become very profitable is these are the products that Borregaard produces. The blue is cellulose, the red is lignin, and that tiny little yellow one on the volume is vanillin. And if you look at where they get the value, that vanillin gives a large amount of value from the products that come out, and that vanillin again goes into flavoring, it goes into perfumes, it goes into all those areas. So again, a very high value application. So some of the work that's going on here, for example, in extractives, I think is an excellent way to get value, whether it's insecticides, fungicides, or even in terms of the perfume market. And the way I wrap up here is the other application we've got is areas such as aviation. For aviation to decarbonize, the only way they can do it is to come in with a biofuel. Again, it can't be electric, it can't be any other form. So how does aviation decarbonize? And this is why the current research that we're doing in our group is actually funded by Boeing. And I think what most people don't realize is what's Boeing doing working with a forestry faculty? Doesn't make sense, but part of the reason they're working with us in BC is we have a very high percentage of sustainably managed forests. So they know the feedstock is being certified sustainable, and the challenge is just trying to convert that material economically. So my punchline here is the message that we sent into COP21 is really the solution for using biomass is going to be with the policymakers, because the fossil fuels are cheap. So if it's going to be straight economics, it doesn't work. And if we keep using coal, for example, we're going to see the effects of climate change, as we've shown with the mountain pine beetle. And one of the problems is a lot of companies don't trust the policymakers, so we're at a bit of an impasse. So given the capital-intensive nature of renewables, we need an assured and reasonable, predictable future. So this is why COP21, I think, was important. Everything looked pretty good, but I know with my US colleagues and Donald Trump coming in, everything's got a bit more uncertain. Also, the big attraction with biomass is it's much more democratically distributed. So it's not just a few countries that have got the oil. So how do we incentivize their use? And biomass, as I said, is more like oil than coal, and we need to incentivize the biorefinery concept. And that's why the focus, where you should be using this biomass is for heat, and particularly for transport. So thank you for your attention.
Many thanks, Jack, for a fascinating presentation. Jack has given us an overview of the evolution of the growth in interest in renewable energies, and particularly bioenergy, drawing on the experience particularly from Canada and the emergence of the now extremely large pellet sector. I recently visited Vietnam, which is also a major supplier of pellets, particularly to China, and the potentials that this offers both in terms of electricity generation and transport. But I would fully agree with him in his concluding remarks for this need for a biorefinery approach. And I think for some of you in the audience who come from Finland, you're probably aware that Neste, which is the largest biodiesel producer in the world, already has adopted such an approach with multi-billion-dollar investments in Singapore, Rotterdam, and in Finland, using different source materials. And I think at the end, Jack also highlighted this need to get policymakers to address this issue of the relatively low cost of fossil fuels. I would add that in many countries we are still confronted with the problem of perverse subsidies for fossil fuels, which is part of where the policy mix really has to fundamentally change. So many thanks, Jack, for a great presentation.
May I now invite Mr. C.M. Seth for his address, please.
Well, very good morning, respected panelists, distinguished foresters, experts, scientists, trainees. I see some of the students also sitting here. Well, today's topic was regarding the new pathways for biodiversity conservation. I thought that to address this sensitive issue of biodiversity conservation, I'll take up one species which is highly threatened, just to give a feeling that how serious is the problem of biodiversity conservation, and what are the pathways, how we can address this issue for the future generations. Well, I have taken this species. I think many of you are already aware. We have one of the biggest goats in Himalayas, It is located on the western end of the Himalayas. That is our Jammu and Kashmir state, the Pir Panjal range, and this species is called the markhor. The scientific name is Capra falconeri kashmiriensis. This is one of the species. Then in the second part, I will also discuss some conservation strategies. In the end, I've got 1 minute video also that I would like to show you. Species is the scientific classification. I will not go into detail. It is already there, but it belongs to the family Bovidae, subfamily Caprini, and the genus is Capra. The species is falconeri. The conservation status of biological species as per the IUCN, it is, I think, already on the websites, but indicates highly serious situation, and many species, they are on the verge of, extinction. And one of the species which I have taken, as I already said, that it is markhor, and interestingly, it had a population in earlier about 15 to 25,000. It has come down to 3,000 number of species. As per the IUCN classification, based on the numbers and the area of occupancy, earlier it was included in the vulnerable category, but recently they have changed it to near threatened. This is my recommendation, that again this should be considered to be covered under the vulnerable category. This has to be again assessed and evaluated. Globally, we have 5 subspecies of this markhor. One is Aster markhor, the second one is the Kabul in Afghanistan, Bukharan, then Kashmir markhor, then there is a Suleiman, it is in Pakistan. The Aster markhor is falconeri, Kabul is Megaceros, and Bukharan is a Heptaneri, and Kashmir is a Kashmiriensis, and the Suleiman is the Dehradun. These are the 5 species. Some of the visuals to make it aware why they are subspecies. Mainly there are 2 categories. One are the straight horn, corkscrew shaped horns, and the other one is the flare horn markhor. Interestingly, this markhor name comes from the Persian name, and I don't know, somehow they relate it to the habit of eating snakes by this species, and they call it the markhor. There may be some other connections also, but this is the most popular, which is believed that it is a snake-eating animal. This one is the Suleiman markhor. It's a very big animal, and you just see the straight horn and the corkscrew shape those horns. This is a Aster variety with a flare horn. It's a very big size. It sometimes grows to 4 to 5 feet, and most of the animals, they were killed because of its trophy value. And it was a very popular game species in early 50s, 60s, 70s, and many animals were killed along the range. This one is the Pir Panjal markhor. It's in one of the very tough terrains. You will see the video of this one. I have just shown the picture. Another very majestic animal in our area. There are local names in different areas. I'll not go into detail. This is the global distribution of markhor species. It starts from southern Tajikistan, southern Uzbekistan, comes to Afghanistan, then northern and central Pakistan, and the last limit is the Kashmir. So that was the original geographical area where it was having a population. That is an estimate from about 70 to 150,000. Once that was the population. Now it has been reduced considerably. You'll just see the maps, how the area has been fragmented. This fragmentation of habitats is one of the major causes of biodiversity getting threatened. So as already discussed by my fellow panelists, that landscape management would be one of the options, pathways for this biodiversity conservation. Just see here, this was the original global distribution I don't know whether it is quite visible or not. So that was the area where this was occurring. And over a period of time, due to poaching, hunting, infrastructure development, habitat loss, so all these factors combined together, now see how much it is fragmented. From one contiguous area, it has become a disjunct distribution of the population, and there is no connectivity in between in all the 5 species. To assess this disjunct distribution of this Pir-Panchal Markhor, in our state we joined with the Wildlife Trust of India and started the survey from 2003 and continued till 2009. The area we covered, it was most of the Pir-Panchal range. Starting, I don't know, many of people, you know this area or not, but I'll say it is the Pir-Panchal range. And mainly, we have 3 or 4 protected areas like Hirpur, like Lachipur, like Nagnari. So it's a very big area. So those were the areas where we did this survey. And the last survey we conducted somewhere in June and July 2009. The methodology adopted is generally known. It is by visual sighting also, indirect through the scats, footprints, their browsing habits. So all those kind of things we used and collected the data spread over 6 years. These were the sites how we started the survey. For first 2 years, it was very difficult to sight the animal. But in the 3rd year, what we did, we started staying in the caves where this animal was staying to have a smell of the animals on our bodies so that they don't get scared and run away. So these were the caves, and the other one is the shelter shed. This place, how we started sighting these animals in the 3rd year, that is the topmost place of our area. We call this as a Burj Court. This is the landscape where this species occurs, and the whole area was scanned. Another area. Generally, these species, they stay in the cliffs, the steep cliffs, where they get, skewered. There is no danger from the predators, so that is the site. But on the other hand, this site is also is a death warrant for these kids and lambs. They jump in the caves, and from there, they come down and they die. We also installed some of the areas during night also. So these were the evidences, how we assess the population of these areas. This is the browsing habit. See, the villages around these protected area. One of the great areas, that is the poaching. And we collected number of horns of different ages from these villages. So this is what one of the recommendation I'm making. The participation of the people around this protected area should be our future focus. Not only the protected area, but how we get the participation of the villagers in the protected areas so that we protect the species, because they are the persons, those who are killing the animals, but they should also be the responsible to protect the animals. These were some of the results. Quickly, I'll go over. The results indicated that the total population in this area, which was earlier in 1880s or 1890, about 3,000 to 4,000, that was the population. Now, this has come down to 250 to 300. So that all because of the fragmentation of the habitat, mainly. And the second one is the killing for trophy. So see, in such a short period, and now it has somehow stabilized because of efficient protection to 250 and 300 number. But some of the areas, the first area, there are only 50 animals. And in 50 animals, no breeding is happening. There is no population growth. And that is on the eastern side of its distribution. On the western side, which is adjoining our Pakistan, and from there you get another species of Astar Markhor. This is our Pir-Panchal Markhor. Here, there is a good protection, and you have a small groups of females up to 19 and 20, and with the other picture is of the female flock, and about 10 to 12 small kids and lambs. Then there are bachelor markhors also, they are at the top of the hill. So there the population is good. Look, this was the original distribution you see on the left side, that snow-capped hill, that whole range was covered with this markhor. The population figures I have given, so quickly, I'll not repeat again. So threats, I have already indicated, and this threat is not only to this species, this is what I said. I have taken this as a case study, and this threat pertains to all the biodiversity species, whether they are plants or animals. And the threats, the biggest threat is the habitat loss. The reason may be anything. Then there is the infrastructure development, there are encroachments, there is the poaching, mining is happening. So all these threats are happening in these habitat areas, and particularly maybe a country like India and some other countries in the world also, there is another conflict of grazing in these areas. It is very difficult, in spite of our best institutional mechanism, in spite of our best legislation, not able to control the grazing in these areas. So this is one of the area of concern which we should address for the future pathways also. I have proposed that rehabilitation and recovery along with the landscape management should be one of the options. I'll not repeat because already these things have been covered. I'm just skipping to save the time. So I'll come straight away to the recommendations. So this is what I have recommended for new pathways in the 21st century. I say that in the 21st century, in the 20th century, lot of efforts have been done at the international, national, and the local level, which includes the protected area network also, which includes legislations, which includes policy changes. But in the 21st century, we should try to find out the gaps. What are the gaps, and try to strengthen those gaps. And what are those gaps? The first three, I again have repeated the same recommendations which we are at present also addressing. That is the traditional way, that the protection of our these landscapes, the ecosystems. In this, I have highlighted one point which should be addressed in the future pathways, that is the endemism. India is one country which has two hotspots, and then endemism is very rich in Himalayas. There also we should declare some of the areas which are endemic rich areas for the protection. Then biotechnology is already a tool which is coming up for the species and genetic the conservation also. Policy changes are happening. I think in the policy changes, this Biodiversity Act 2002 is one of the wonderful tools as far I say the India is concerned. This is such a legislation where you have the scientific knowledge, you have the policy, and you have the public participation. And then also it directs the government to have the action program, National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Program. I think one of the best documents, and something has been achieved already in India. I think more than 37,000 biodiversity management committees have people participation have come. They are working to have the pupil biodiversity registers. That is another wonderful participation, public participation in the biodiversity, and this needs to be strengthened and moved forward in the coming years. So that's what I have said. And then lastly, I have said that we should have the participation of knowledge, participation of governments, participation of research, and participation of voluntary organization, the exchange of knowledge. The exchange of knowledge using the modern technology, information technology, we should build up that what should be the new pathways. And I think in the coming years, some already good work is happening. I was just reading one of the papers, the equator, that approach. In the equator approach of the UNDP, they have given the pathway. And they have only addressed 3 issues. The first one is awareness, second is the pupil participation, and third is the policy. So this is, oh yes, thank you. And I'll just close, and after this, I'll just show 1 minute with the permission of the chair, the video, and please play the video. See the majestic animal. And this picture I have taken, it took me 3 years to take this wonderful picture, and this is the only picture available in the world. I have the copyright of this picture, but I thought this is the right forum I'll present. Just watch it, enjoy it. Thank you with these words. Thank you for your patience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seth, for your insightful presentation on the distribution and conservation status of tree conservation. He has talked about the historical background of distribution of our species and living status. It is heartening to note that now the population has increased and stabilizing. He has very rightly pointed out that very difficult to take our conservation initiatives forward. The threats he has mentioned are universal for all kind of species, be it habitat fragmentation, be it poaching. India, of course, has taken not many initiatives in terms of national biodiversity study, strategy and action plan, or be it updation of Wildlife Protection Act, or enaction of Biodiversity Act. But unless the local population is taken into confidence and they are made partners in our conservation efforts, it's difficult to, take the conservation initiatives forward. So once again, thank you very much, Mr. Seth, for your presentation. The last speaker for this plenary is Dr. Khati, who is PCF Wildlife and Chief Wildlife Warden of Uttarakhand. I request him to make his address, please.
Good morning. Thank you, the moderator, Dr. Garola and Dr. David Wardell, distinguished participants and fellow keynote speakers. Just I am speaking about my experience in working in this state, where I am sitting. The state is Uttarakhand, where the conclusion what we derive from the previous experience of other work, the foresters, and from my own experience, that until unless you have the livelihood options for the local communities, probably the conservation of biodiversity is not possible in present scenario in the state of Uttarakhand. I'm giving 6 case studies. I'll run through very fast because the time is limited, 15 minutes, and I will try to give a glimpse of what we are doing and what the results are there. These are the initial this should have been the last slide, but involving people in conservation is main stakeholder. This is the first thing. Forest state with few livelihood options like Uttarakhand, livelihood options have a great potential. And I'm quoting 3 studies one by one. Ascot landscape is a sanctuary which is bordering China and Nepal, and the Corbett National Park or landscape, which is famous for the tiger, and we have the highest density of tiger in the world in this tiger reserve. Then Dhanolti ecosystem, the lizard and nature-based ecotourism project where you had been yesterday. and eco-restoration in the Valley of Flowers, which is World Heritage Site, and the Nanda Devi National Park, which is also the Bird Heritage Site. And finally, the project which are looking to protect snow leopard as a secure from the UNDP JEF funding, that is called Snow Leopard Landscape Secure Project. Ascot, I will not go in detail about this thing, and this is one of the very rich areas where we have 8 major vegetation type, important species like the vegetation species and faunal species like musk deer and the snow leopard and Satyra tragopan and Siberian weasel, Tibetan woolly hare and Kiang, the wild ass in the cold deserts of Himalayas. These are the species which are represented in the Ascot landscape. One of them is the tree fern, which is very rare in India. Australia, I saw a lot of tree ferns, but in India, this is the area where we have the musk deer, which is poached for its gland, which is supposed to be used in the perfume industry, and the Satyra tragopan, which is a very colorful and most beautiful bird in our state. A livelihood option to protect these species, we gave these options. We provided because potable water supplies, and we have given the walnut trees as a plantation to enhance the income, and also other fruit-bearing cash crop species. The medicinal plants and the cash crops were other options given as livelihood, and these are the traditional weaving, the livelihood upgradation, fodder bank, which responded people towards wildlife conservation, water and weed eradication for the wild habitat, and this is also a very positive result. And you see that we are distributing fruit trees, fruit-bearing trees. We are providing the seeds for the walnut, which is very nice thing. Then we are also making the local handicrafts from the hill bamboo, and the skills were transferred to these people. Improvement of breed and fodder banks, and this is the results that at least the poaching of wildlife and the man-animal conflict reduce in this area. The second landscape I'm discussing, where I have the wide experience of working, is the Corbett landscape. Corbett Tiger Reserve is the first national park of the Asian subcontinent, and it is located in the Shivaliks and the foothills of Himalayas, and 0.2 million tourists are visiting every year, and the economy of the township of Ramnagar is totally dependent on this tiger reserve. And we have more than 200 resorts in the vicinity of this tiger reserve, and 250 vehicles, like yesterday you took, many of you took those gypsies inside the park area. So 200 gypsies and 90 guides are given livelihood, and total livelihood benefits is around 100 million Indian rupees. These are the species, and you can see the charismatic species like tiger can bring 100 billion to a small area of Ramnagar. Similarly, I hope that the other tiger reserves in this country, we have more than 50 tiger reserves now, probably they are enhancing the local species. So until unless you provide alternative livelihood, these species will not be protected. And many groups are only coming to Corbett to see the bird life, the rare birds, and many of them are very endangered, and people say that many of them are only available and endemic to Corbett Tiger Reserves. You can see the local people, we have very small, humble type of resorts, and we have also 5-star resorts. And the tiger, tiger is the flagship species. In 1973, we devoted our money and efforts to save this tiger, and we have a respectable population of 340 tigers in this total landscape, and we have around 1,800 Asian elephants, and probably this is the heaven to see these two animals, and that's why the visitation is increasing, and now we are thinking to spread this tourism into time and space, or to give an alternative habitat where we can promote tourism. Corbett has enough. Dhanolti ecotourism, yesterday because you have a very good brief from the people there, but I will just show you the photograph, what was Dhanolti earlier and what is today. 17 million visitors are coming, 0.17 million visitors are coming, and 5 million Indian rupees the communities who are employed there, earning from them. And this is the today's situation that is a very improved one, and everybody appreciate the efforts of the Forest Department. But I will show you the earlier photograph. See the entrance where you entered inside the park area. This was a garbage dump of the small town of Dhanolti. And today on the right-hand side, it is the change and improved version, and communities themselves are maintaining them. This is the Eco Park site, which was also just a wasteland there, and people were just destroying the habitat there. After putting efforts from the Forest Department, the Eco Park site is now one of the beautiful sites wherever whomsoever goes there gets satisfied. This is the location on the left-hand side where we had the bamboo hut. Now we have now bamboo huts, and one most of the most popular the site. One day I was there. I met a gentleman who was the managing director of Kirloskar Toyota in India, and he left the hotel nearby and came here to stay by spending money in both the places. He said that this is such a beautiful place, I want to stay here, and though he had paid in the hotels, but he stayed here. So small efforts and until unless you provide employment to the people, and the changes can be brought. This is one of the very good example, and two earlier example I have shown. Mountaineering is another very popular sport or the adventure in Uttarakhand. It was very unorganized before 2000 when the state was created, and we have many peaks which are more than 7,000 meters, and very, all over the world people are coming. The first policy was described in 2003 guidelines. We described that we will not allow more than 2 expeditions in a peak, and not more than 12 in a year. So that's why the number were restricted, and fees and tariffs for the first time were levied on these people, whomsoever is coming. Otherwise, Indian Mountaineering Federation was only the organization which was taking money. State government was not aware who is going and who is coming. And mind it, these were mostly in the national parks or sanctuary. So that's why we have to give guidelines. That's why. And we have local now tour operators which are registered, and helpers, porters, and strict environmental safeguards are taken. And only because my office is the responsible office which give permit to scale these mountains. This is the guideline on the left-hand side, which was in 2003, and on the right-hand side, you can try that we have the second highest peak of India, Nanda Devi, in our state, which is the third highest peak of the world. We have 83 peaks open for, out of more than 200 peaks, we have opened 83 peaks for mountaineering, and a few of them are more than 7,000, and we have differential fees based on the altitude of the peak. If the peak is more, we charge more, and the peak is less in the height, then we charge less. And that's why the number of visitors, and because we have restrictions of 2 expeditions per month and 12 in a year, and we know that the mountaineering expeditions are only confined to 2 or 3 months, not more than that. The other World Heritage Site is the Nanda Devi National Park. It's a biosphere reserve now, and it was established in 1988, and a lot of efforts were made under the Man and Biosphere program, and where we have opened with the help of, because the main peak of Nanda Devi, the expedition after 1983, we didn't allow any expedition to go, except every 10 years we are sending scientific expedition led by the forest officers, and we'll decide one day whether we should open it again or not. But what to give an alternate employment to the people, so we gave them horticulture options, small saving groups we made, technological interventions of traditional craft like weaving, and we provided them carding plants, and slowly the people are happy by the closing of the mountaineering in the Nanda Devi main peak. This is the map. We have Biosphere Reserve and 2 yellowish or pinkish structures. They are 2 World Heritage Sites. One is Nanda Devi National Park, another is the Valley of Flowers, the National Park, which is famous for the fauna and flora. These are the species mentioned in the list of in the Nanda Devi. Bharal, the blue sheep, on the left-hand side. Then we have musk deer, we have Himalayan thar, then we have snow leopard, we have serow, we have koklas, and the monal pheasant, and we have our state flower that is called Brahma Kamal in this thing, and the lady sleepers orchid. And the Valley of Flowers is one of the most beautiful sites, and it is the World Heritage Site, and it opens for, you can see only for 1 or 2 months the peak of blooming there, and the bloom will be full in the month of August, and many people are coming now. People are representing from the different, and I will see you a plant. These are the efforts. Yes, I will show you. These the income generations activities which Forest Department. This is the decadal expedition which we start we allow every 3 years. This was led by young forest officer who was yesterday probably he met you. He is representing the DFO Nainital, the Mussoorie now, Dr. Saket Badola, and he led this expedition after 10 years, and they have submitted this the report from the other scientific institutions, but also part like FRI, Wildlife Institute of India, Geological Survey of India for this thing, and they have just submitted their report whether it is the right time to open Nanda Devi National Park for mountaineering or not. This is the part of expedition where they stayed in the hills. Eco-restoration in Valley of Flowers. As I mentioned that Valley of Flowers, because there was no restrictions earlier, so almost the area was like a garbage dump, and plastics and the mules where people were using mules to transport their luggage, and they were sometimes going by using mules, and the mule dung. Everything was stinking there, and the beauty of the area is almost gone. So high volume of visitors, that too in only 5 months. So tons of non-biodegradable garbage was thrown in the trail along with the mule droppings. Bhundar Eco Development Committee was established in 2000 and regularly cleaned and managed the area, and periodic cleaning of the 15-kilometer high altitude trail. Garbage segregated and sent to the recycling in the Rishikesh, which is very close to Dehradun, for the compacting and sending it to the industries to use as a raw material. So when we started this operation, there was a lot of resentment from the people because the number were restricted, the visitors were registered, and that too also the route is common with the famous shrine of Hemkund, which is for the Sikhs. So we regulated this thing, but now things are under control, and we are trying to develop the trail as one of the best known trail of the world. This is the Valley of Flowers, now free from the garbage, and the people are coming here with a lot of hopes, and especially end of July or first week of August is the most suitable time to visit this thing.
Please wind up, Dr.
Yeah, just I was showing, this is my last slide. I was showing just the blue poppy, which is the national flower of Japan. Many people from Japan are only coming to see this flower in this valley. So this is the thing, and this is the garbage, and the other project which are using for snow leopard is the UNDP-GF, where we are concentrating on these 4 components: and biodiversity conservation, securing sustainable livelihood, control of illegal trade, and improved knowledge communication policy uptake. These are the species which are from that area where this project is coming: brown bear, blue sheep, snow leopard, and these are the peaks. The famous river Ganges has its origin from here, and this is the end of my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khati. And his talk has underlined the fact that if we want to achieve sustainable conservation, we need to take into account the needs of the people, we need to involve the locals, and develop a win-win situation for them and for us. So with this, we come to the end of the presentations. The floor is now open for questions as well as suggestions. But because of paucity of time, please be very brief If the question is addressed to a particular panelist, you may please name the panelist. So we start with the first question. We have about 7 to 10 minutes for questions and suggestions. Backside on the right of us. We'll give up.
My question is for Mr. DVS Khati. I am currently working.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm currently working in the Ascot landscape. So, as sir has mentioned about the ecotourism and handicrafts and cash crop promotion. So, my question basically is, are there some innovative livelihood options that are being explored to promote the traditional mountain crops as means of livelihood, either through your through the forest department or in collaboration with some local institutes? Thank you.
Yeah, Wildlife Institute of India is our partner institute for that, and the researchers are also working there. And with their help, we have identified certain areas where we have to work, and they are very innovative. Like the walnut was among the species very hardy, and a lot of money is coming from that. The other thing was the concept of fodder bank and improvement of habitat. That provided employment also, livelihood to the people also, and improved the habitat for wildlife. That's why I have run through those slides that the seizures, illegal trade of wildlife are reducing, because that's a vulnerable porous border with the Nepal and China. That's why the number of reducing, because people have options for livelihood.
Yes, gentleman this side.
I want to ask question to Sir C.N. Seth. I am a BSc second year student. Today we are more concentrated and excited to reduce the number of vermins rather than the conservation of threatened species, because there are vast difference in the ratio of threatened and vermins. We are humans, but we should also understand that we are only a part of that animal kingdom. If we reduce the number of one species of the vermin today, then another species is ready for the next year. So I want to attract all the policymakers to satisfy me. Thank
you. This is a scientific fact, because in the ecosystem, all the living organisms, there is an eco-balance of the populations. So that's true, whatever you have said. And that's why, these new pathways are being suggested. One is that is landscape management, that should be taken care of. That's number one. Number two, that as per the carrying capacity of that area, the populations shall have to be maintained. If they are not being maintained, or if they, because of certain anthropogenic reasons or some other reasons, they are getting reduced, their populations have to be rehabilitated. So that these are the options available.
I would like to ask a question to Dr. Seth. Dr. Seth, you worked on only one animal throughout your life. Looks so. It's very nice. I want to know the Markhor name must have derived from some characteristics of this animal. Can you tell us what is that character from where it has derived its name, Markhor? Markhor is a blessing. It's not a blessing, but it's a very aggressive type of name.
Can you repeat your question? It's not very clear.
I sir want you to tell me, the Markhor name is a very specific name and it's a very aggressive name. Can you tell me one characteristic of this animal from which it has derived its name?
I got your point. How they are differentiated. This Markhor is differentiated from one area to another. That is your question? Acha, Markhor naam. Okay. How the nomenclature came?
The meaning of this Markhor is aggressive.
Okay.
What is the characteristic of this animal which derived its name as Markhor?
Markhor, okay. The very first, I told that this Markhor is a Persian word. And in Persian, Markhor means a animal who eats the snakes. They call, and maybe that some of the researcher in Persia has seen this Markhor, and it's not the characteristic with Markhor. Most of the ungulates, they go near these crevasses and below the stones and rocks, they just, take a smell there. And maybe that he has seen that because this is characteristic, and maybe that he has seen that. That's one. The second one is from the Pushto word. From the Pushto word, because it is found in Afghanistan also, in the Hindu Kush Himalayas. There, in the Pushto word, these corkscrew-shaped horns. So they call it a Markhor. This is a horn shape of the horn. And third is the Kashmiri version. The Kashmiri version, in the Kashmiri Markhur, Khur is the foot, and Mar is the killing. And they have the typical habit you have seen in the video. The first animal, when he came on the rock, he was looking to the colleagues, the rest warning them, and they were giving the warning like this, tap, tap, tap. So maybe that is the reason in Kashmiri they called it a Markhor, an animal which, taps on the rock, the khur. Khur is the foot. I think you got the reply. Thank you. These were the three, versions.
No, we will take questions from another audience. Yes, please.
Thank you. I have got one question each for three other presenters. First is for Dr. H.S. Singh. Are you ready to part away your lines to Madhya Pradesh? Number one. And one question to Jack. You have mentioned about the biofuels. How these biofuels meet the Euro 6 standard on road? And third question is for Mr. Khati. Regarding, you have shown this valley of flowers. Some time back, it was said that this valley of flowers is going to vanish very soon. And you said that because of the eco-development activities, it has come back. So I just want your comments on that.
No, because of paucity of time, I don't think we can take all three questions. We'll take one question only. So.
Thank you. I'm not decision maker, and decision about the translocation of line to alternative sites to taken by the government. Professionally, I can answer. There is no problem because population is, Gujarat is comfortable population, about 600. So if dozen or half dozen animals are shifted, then it is not going to have much impact. But the question is survival of animal in this area, because lion never survive in the true tropical environment. It evolved in temperate subtropical environment. It survived in those parts of India when many ice ages were there, from 1380 to 1850. That was the period where lion occurred there. After that, temperature went up. In Gujarat also, in Gir, during summer season, all lions retired in the cool environment, riverine bed, where temperature remained below 40 degrees. The question is whether this species, which evolved in temperate subtropical region, lived even in Serengeti temperature never exceed 32 degrees. Always it is in subtropical environment or temperate. Whether it can survive in hot environment of Madhya Pradesh, that has to be seen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The young man at the very end, and that is going to be the last question. Yes, please.
Sir, my name is Vijay Vardhan Pandey, FRI. My question is a fungus called Cordyceps, Ophiocordyceps sinensis, found in higher Himalayas and have a very good medicinal property like anti-HIV, anti-cancerous activity. Is there any policy for livelihood for local people where this mushroom or a fungus found?
Yeah, the Cordyceps is probably one of the very important species for this Ascot landscape. Probably are referring to that landscape also. And the cause of conflict among the people also. Many deaths are taking place because the
conditions are very inhospitable, and that's why many people are dying there. We have a policy for the outside the protected area, where the Ban Panchayats, they are supposed to register themselves with the forest corporations, and they can sell it in the open market. But for the protected areas, we cannot permit them, and they are sometimes the pretext of the Panchayats, people are entering in the sanctuary area, which the forest department is trying to stop. And soon we'll have a policy, in this policy is already framework is with the government of Uttarakhand. I hope by the end of this month or next month, we will have some policy for the cardiopsis extraction in Uttarakhand.
Thank you, sir.
So thank you very much. We had a very fruitful session. However, because of lack of time, we are not able to take more questions. To conclude the session, first of all, I would like to invite my co-moderator, David, for his concluding remarks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gario. Again, it's Dr. Gario and I who are between you and your next cup of tea or coffee, so I'll try and be brief in the interest of everyone. I think we've had a very rich panel of speakers and have heard of the key challenge of how we translate some of the international agreements that the government of India has ratified, signed up to, its translation into national action plans, but this key need to try and see improvements in terms of implementation on the ground. The second key point I retained from Dr. Sin's presentation was the critical importance of keeping cognizant of rapidly changing contexts, particularly in terms of the changing economy of many millions of rural smallholders. And I think the third key message that came out of his talk was this need to prioritize, both in terms of critically endangered species, but also major conservation landscapes. The important point he raised in terms of the context also related to this question of applying biotechnology to improve productivity. And this is then led on to Jack Sadler's presentation, who gave us a very interesting overview of the worldwide growth in renewable energy and the particular contribution of bioenergy or biofuels. And he highlighted the challenges both in terms of data needs and the reliability of data that's out there, but also the challenges of securing supplies. I would add, I think there are many challenges associated with the carbon accounting systems, which remains a controversial area, vis-a-vis bioenergy. This led on to the third presentation, which is a very specific study looking at the markhor and the biodiversity conservation efforts associated with this particular species. It is listed, if I'm not mistaken, in Appendix 2 of CITES, and we heard in some detail some of the efforts the government is making. Lastly, we had 6 rich case studies briefly presented by Dr. Kati in terms of this critical importance of engaging with local communities and their role in helping the government's efforts to try and protect both species but also landscapes in many different parts of India, with a particular focus on Uttarakhand state. So I would like to end just by thanking all the speakers and hand over to the chair.
Thank you very much, David, for so beautifully summing up the session, and you have left hardly anything for me to add. However, just by way of conclusion, I would still add a few points. The key points that have emerged here is that biodiversity conservation in isolation, either sectorally or in terms of the implementing agencies, is not possible. We have to take all the stakeholders together, and we have to ensure that the local people are benefited out of conservation efforts in terms of improvement of their livelihood, in terms of giving them employment. Then only biodiversity conservation initiatives are likely to be successful. And as they say, if it pays, it stays. So we have to devise mechanisms as to how we can have win-win situations for the cause of conservation as well as for supporting the livelihood of the local people. Secondly, of course, protected area network is a very potent tool for biodiversity conservation. However, particularly in the context of our country, we have experienced that too much of regulation may be counterproductive. If we look at the protected area network categories of IUCN and compare them with our own protected area network categories, I personally feel that we need to be more accommodative to the local aspirations and local needs rather than just focusing on conservation without development of the local communities. That way, probably such conservation efforts may ultimately prove to be counterproductive. So there is a need to relook as to what kind of tools we need to have for developing protected area networks, particularly with reference to India. We need to have a holistic landscape level or ecosystem level approach to biodiversity conservation, which means that we need to have established coordination and cooperation mechanisms at various levels, that is international levels, national and regional levels, to bring on board all the stakeholders. Then only we can have a holistic conservation platform available for us. And in the end, I would like to say that biodiversity conservation is to be ingrained in the national ethos, and it has to be made a way of life rather than an official program. Until and unless we take it as part of our life, we mold our own lifestyles to ensure conservation of nature in general, we won't be succeeding in our efforts. So with these few words, I conclude this plenary session. I thank the audience for their patient listening, and I also take this opportunity to thank all our 4 panelists for their very insightful presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We are extremely thankful to the keynote speakers for their talks on various issues and pathways for biodiversity conservation. We are also thankful to our moderators for conducting and summing up the session. Now, the organizers of the 19th Commonwealth Forestry Conference would like to felicitate the moderators and the keynote speakers as a mark of respect and gratitude. First, may I request Dr. S.C. Garola to kindly present a memento to Dr. H.S. Singh. Thank you, sir. I request, sir, to felicitate Dr. Sadler also. Thank you, sir. Now I request Dr. Wardle to honor Dr. C.M. Seth. I request him to honor Mr. Kharti also. Thank you, sir. Now I call upon Dr. V.P. Tiwari, Director, Himalayan Forest Research Institute, Shimla, to present a memento to the moderators of the session. I request him to first present a memento to Dr. S.C. Garola. I also request him to present a memento to Dr. Wardle. Thank you, sir. We thank the rapporteurs of this session who have been taking the notes on the highlights of this session. Ladies and gentlemen, there are a few announcements. The parallel technical sessions would begin at 11:30 a.m. at 3 venues. One is this hall, the other is the boardroom, and third venue is the NFLIC hall. The partners session will be held in boardroom. All the sponsoring partners of the 19th Commonwealth Forestry Conference are requested to join for that session in boardroom and contribute. There's another announcement regarding the newsletters and all the photographs of the various events of the CFC. They are available on the conference website and they can be downloaded from the conference website. And ladies and gentlemen, with this we conclude the plenary session. We thank you all and invite you to join for a cup of tea in the Mango Grove. Thank you.